Okay, thank you. Now, for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to the Malouf Foundation Summit. For those of you who are joining us online, my name is Clay Olson, and I am your host today. Now, before we introduce this next panel, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the We Believe You campaign. Now, this is a Malouf Foundation initiative, initially started by Elizabeth Smart, and the We Believe You campaign is exactly what it sounds like. When someone discloses abuse to you, believe them. Simple as that. We encourage you and hope that you'll go upstairs to the booth area and sign and take the We Believe You pledge. We want to fill that up with your signatures here today. There's more information about the We Believe You campaign and initiative upstairs, and you can learn more about that. Now, this next panel, we are so excited to have these individuals with us. We are lucky to have these three women join us up here on stage. They are three leaders in the survivor world, and they are going to share with us their experiences, their lived experiences, and how their journey of healing was unique to each of them. This panel will be moderated by Ashley Flowers, and she is the founder of Audiochuck Productions and the host of Crime Junkie podcast, where she passionately supports survivors and spreads awareness about abuse and trauma. Now, please help me welcome to the stage our panelists, Suzie Skirvin, Kara Chamberlain, and Tanya Gould, along with Ashley Flowers. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I want to start off by introducing you. He did a wonderful job. This is Kara, Tanya, and Suzie. And I do want to start off by saying thank you to the Malouf Foundation. So I work in media, obviously, and I can't tell you how many conversations I've been a part of about survivors. Very few where people have the conversation about survivors with survivors, which is so important for any kind of change in the community that we're trying to make. Is survivors have to be at the center of it. So thank you to the Malouf Foundation for recognizing that, but most of all, thank you to the three of you. Part of being a leader survivor that all three of you are is telling your story, and it's amazing that you're willing to share that with all of us. So I would love to start out for each of you to share your story, however comfortable you are, to whatever extent. Kara, if you want to go first.
Yeah, my name is Kara Robinson Chamberlain, and when I was 15 years old in 2002, I was kidnapped from my friend's front yard by a man that was a total stranger to me. He took me to his home where I was assaulted for 18 hours until I was able to escape him while he was sleeping. He went on the run after my escape, and a couple of days later, he was found. In the meantime, investigators responded to his apartment, and they found information that led them to believe that he may have committed other crimes. So when law enforcement caught up with him, there was a police chase that ended in his death. He actually committed suicide, and soon after, he was linked to 3 unsolved homicides from 1996 and 1997 in Virginia. So I escaped a man who intended to kill me. And so went on to become a survivor, work in law enforcement, and I'm here today because I met Elizabeth, and she really kind of reignited the advocacy spark for me.
Tanya?
Awesome, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So my name is Tanya Gould. I'm a survivor of domestic sex trafficking. For my situation, I was actually exiting high school, went on a senior field trip, and met my trafficker there. Of course, he didn't look like a trafficker. He was well-groomed. He wasn't what we appear to be when we hear of, and I say this term because this is the culture of it, but when we think of pimps, right? Didn't have the big hat, alligator boots. He was actually very handsome, well-groomed, well put together. He was my date for my senior field trip. He groomed me for about 4 months, and then as I was about to go into college, I had a scholarship to go to our local community college. I need to let you know that I had a ton of vulnerabilities, but I did receive a scholarship to go to the community college. So I have every intention of just really doing remarkable things in my life then. So my trafficker convinced me that, trafficking was a business. I never heard of it in those terms, that, this was a business. It was something that his mom was giving over to him. And he also convinced me that it wasn't the old school type of pimping and hoeing, right, is what it's heard of in our culture, right? So that is how I understood it. I understood that because that's what I understood. When you listen to music, entertainment, rap songs, that's what I was accustomed to. And so he led me to believe that it was very much different, that I could be empowered. I reluctantly said yes, right, because he had loved me through these 4 months that we were together. I also had a little one. He took the initiative. I was sexually abused from the time I was 7 to 14. I had child exploitive images passed around. I was involved in cult church community as a child. So I had no trusted adult in my life. So this was the first time a man showed me something as to what I thought love was. And so I fell in love with my trafficker. And so when he asked me to be a part of this, for me, it was about keeping something that I thought that I never had. I thought it was healthy, and I thought it was something I could never have. So it was with that he used to convince me to work for him. It didn't, as you can imagine, right? It didn't work out as what I thought. I thought he told me I would be his queen. I wouldn't have to do some of the things that I thought I would have to do, but it ended up turning around very different. So I was trafficked for about 18 months. And then after that, it was a law enforcement officer who actually went with his gut and helped me find a way back home. And since then, I've been advocating for all types of issues. And now I am a director of anti-human trafficking for the Attorney General's office in the state of Virginia. I'm also a member of the United States Advisory Council on Human Trafficking. I serve on a ton of boards and commissions. And what I love doing the most, I worked as a mentor for our children's hospital and to work with kids who were identified as being trafficked. And it's amazing being on the other side of this and looking at kids and just letting them know that their situation doesn't have to define them, but that they can still do anything they want to do.
My name is Suzie Skirvin. I was trafficked when I was 19 years old. I had just recently moved from Arizona to Los Angeles. I wanted to go to nursing school at UCLA, and I began dating while I was, when I first moved there. And that was my passion, was helping people. And I also wanted to go into the military. But then, like I said, I started dating and I met my trafficker. And again, he wasn't dressed in like you would think a pimp would be dressed like. He was very well groomed and very soft-spoken to me. He found all my vulnerabilities. He studied me. I was his business. And that's how he saw me throughout the grooming process. And I was groomed for about 2 months. And in those 2 months, everything moved so quickly. He started taking care of me. He started paying for things for me. And so I began to trust him. And later he's like, you know what? You want to go to UCLA? You want to go into the military to pay for school? How about you don't do that and you just stay here and I'll help you and I'll help you follow your dreams. And I believed him. And I moved in, and that same night we went to dinner like we always did, and he told me, we were just having a casual dinner conversation, and he just asked me, so how are you going to make all this, how are you going to pay for everything? And I said, well, you told me that you were going to help me financially. And he had the most evil grin I have ever seen. And I can still picture him. He just had his utensils sitting right across from me, and he looked up and he grinned and he said, yeah, about that. And at that moment, my stomach just sank. And I knew that this was not going to be good. So I acted casually, and I sat there and I continued to eat my dinner, and he's like, "You're actually going to be my bitch now." And I laughed, I kind of giggled, and I was like, what? Like, what? He had never spoken to me in that way, so I was so shocked, I didn't even know what to say. And so I finished up my dinner. He kept talking, but in my mind, I was like, how do I get out of here? What is going on? This is not right. But I stayed, and from that day on, he had me working in strip clubs, and he had me finding clients, and he would set all the appointments up for me. And that was my life from Monday through Sunday, and I wasn't allowed to tell my family where I was or where I lived, and he controlled everything down to my nail color. And that's how my life was until I was able to escape. And I had a friend help me. We actually grew up together, small world. Again, how close this is to us. We went to seminary together here in Alpine, Utah, and she had now been living in Malibu, and her boyfriend was best friends with my trafficker. I didn't know this when I met him, but I asked to hang out with her one time, and I showed him a picture, and he told me I couldn't hang out with her. And I tried to call her for some help, and she told me that he was dangerous and that she couldn't help me at that time. Well, she knew that things escalated because my family didn't know where I was, and he had posted really inappropriate pictures of me online, and so everyone I grew up with saw me exposed. And he tried to do that because he knew my family was really religious, and he thought it would be a way to have them not let me come home, to disgrace me. And so that was his attempt when I first escaped. Well, I went back to him, actually, because that same friend convinced me to go back to him. Long story short, she actually called me one day while we were traveling, him and I, my trafficker and I, and told me that I needed to run. At this point, we were in Seattle. I had no idea where I was. I had a flip phone, a burner phone, and so I didn't have GPS, so she told me, "You just need to leave right now, Susie. I don't know why. I'm sorry I didn't help you before, but just go." So I did. I got in my car and drove, and that night I was able to talk to my parents again, and my dad flew out to Seattle the next morning, and we drove all the way home. Well, my amazing mom, she didn't know anything about what had really happened, but she did have the instinct to get me a trauma-informed doctor. And so the whole process from then on out was pretty amazing. But in that visit, I actually found out that I was pregnant. And so I am a mom to a beautiful 5-year-old boy now. But with that, he has been a blessing in my life, and I knew that I needed to get myself together, and that I was going to have this baby boy, and that I needed to use this as a learning tool in my life. And since then, there have been many people that have touched me. And I had my son and went into the police academy, graduated, did that for a little bit, and took a break. And I'm working in a law firm, learning how that works. How the legal side works and things, and now I'm going back into law enforcement, and my passion is just educating. I want to get into every police department and educate our law enforcement officers on how to speak to our survivors who are so boldly to escape and share their stories. In my experience, I didn't have a very good experience with law enforcement. My detective actually accused me of some pretty harsh things, and I finally was able to call the department and put a complaint against her, but not in a way that I wanted her to get fired. I asked the sergeant if I could go in and give their department training on how to speak to their victims and survivors, and he accepted, and we've been in email communication. And so that is the type of work that I really am passionate about, is just educating everyone and every crook and cranny there is in this nation of human trafficking. So a little bit about me.
Thank you. You know, something I think that we've heard over and over is that it's not what we thought it looked like. The trafficking, the person who trafficked me, and I think that that's something that I've even come to learn. It's not a one size fits all, but I also think, again, this is healing and choosing to move forward, that a survivor isn't necessarily what people think a survivor is. Sometimes I think people can picture someone who is broken. And Tanya, to your point of, I'm working with these young kids who identify as trafficked, I think it's amazing that people can look to the three of you and see a strong woman, an actual leader in the community. So I think that is more important than any part of this, is how you guys have chose to move forward. And so I would love to hear a little bit about what that journey was for you, how you went from being trafficked to being a leader.
For me, I was 15 when I was kidnapped by a man that, again, did not look like someone that was going to kidnap me. There were no red flags that were thrown up for me that made me think that he was someone who had ill wishes towards me. So when I escaped, I had a lot of interactions with law enforcement of varying degrees, and some were positive and some were negative, from having a elected official who told me less than 24 hours after my escape that I should be dead and that man was going to kill me, to the man that I really attribute a lot of my identification as a survivor to, who is the sheriff that I went on to work for. So he's the sheriff of Richland County, and he immediately took me under his wing, and he never treated me like that girl that was raped. That was a tool that my captor used to kind of keep me, I guess it goes into that appeasement that we were talking about earlier. That was a tool. He said, when I'm done with you, I'm going to let you go, and then it's your decision whether you go to law enforcement, and you're always known as the girl that was raped. And so I was very passionate about being more than that, and I did not want to be identified as my captor had labeled me. And so the sheriff of Richland County, he treated me like Kara, and he treated me like a survivor from day one, from taking me to a dinner with the two men that picked me up and took me to law enforcement and helping me to give them an award. He gave me an award for bravery. He offered me a job working in law enforcement, which was never a field that I necessarily would have considered, but very much took me under his wing and let me know that I was so much more, which I think we've had some conversations about, and how I think one of the paths towards embracing being a survivor is realizing that I'm not just that girl that was kidnapped. There's so much more to me, and really kind of finding what that looks like, which has looked different over the years. But I also resonated a lot with what Elizabeth said earlier about making choices. That's also something that has been very helpful for me, where, you know, after I escaped, everyone told my mother, they told my family, well, you have to make her go to counseling. And for me, that was not something that resonated as being helpful at that time. And my mother allowed me that choice. And even from the time that I was in the hospital for the nurse examiner, the sexual assault nurse examiner exam, I asked my mother to leave the room. And she's had a lot of guilt and doubt about if that was the right decision. And I kind of had to assure her, like, no, you did absolutely the right thing, because for me, that was one of the first choices that I was able to make. I wanted to maintain some of that privacy for myself, and I asked her to leave the room, and she did, so she allowed me to do that. So those are the things that really have had the most impact for me for making that transition. And it's definitely something, it's not like you choose it once and you just all of a sudden are a survivor. It's something that you have to choose continuously, and you make a lot of decisions along the way. And so that's kind of been my path.
Okay. For me, it was super difficult coming out of my situation. My trafficker did his very best to make sure I continued to have a disconnect because of all the trauma that I had as a child and into my teens. It was a small community, so everyone does this, and I always use this because this is how it felt. And this is, you know, the distance from their heart to mine, or mine heart to theirs, right? And so I grew up with that feeling this space right here. And so coming back into my community, had no idea what I had gone through. He did a great job with, you know, continuing that separation from my community. So I felt alone. I was a single mom, had my own place. I knew that I had already, you know, I was a person of color. I was a teenage mom. I didn't want statistics to like follow me. I didn't want to live that out. So I did my best to not live in the projects, you know, as a single mom. I didn't want that story. I didn't want that story for my kids. I tried to go to social services and get some of the help. I had to, you know, being the sassy person that I am, I had to make a lot of things happen to me, and it was very difficult. Just being in that lifestyle and watching the amount of money that flowed between buyers and my trafficker, it was very difficult to try to do things on my own, because remember I told you earlier I had all these vulnerabilities. I didn't have trusted adults in my life. I didn't have people who were supporting me and telling me that I could be all I could be, right? And then supporting that effort financially, right? And so now here I am trying to be all I can be as a single mom. And I had to make my own choices. And my own choices sucked. They were terrible. I mean, you know, but I had to go through it. But what I learned through that, I learned so much about who I really am. And what helped me a lot was I became really interested in like taking different types of tests, skill-based tests, and really affirming who I felt like I was. And that was huge for me. Learning more about that part of me, doing my best to connect to resources. Another thing that I felt was that society said to me that if you go through certain experiences, you should feel a certain amount of shame, right? And I felt it like a coat, like a cloak put over me. And I just remember feeling like, why should I wear this shame? That this is something that my trafficker and those who abused me in my youth, or who neglected me, my family and people who were there to take care of me, why should I wear something that they projected onto me that's unfair? So I made a choice to do my best to take that off, to talk about hard topics. I'm also HIV positive. And when I found out that I was HIV positive, it was in the 90s. That was hard. But I saw that women, especially women of color, it was affecting them, not just me. I saw that I wasn't the only one who was being trafficked. I saw that I wasn't the only one who had been abused as a child. And this is just not okay. And so coming from, it's like I was seeing all of this and understanding that, you know, here I was in these controlling situations, you know, with people who did not supervise me appropriately. And then I come out to the world, because in my mind I'm like, I can't wait till I become an adult, because I'm just going to do better. And then I come out into the world, and then you have a whole society that wants to control you. That was so disappointing. There was a whole society of adults and caretakers that I felt like we just didn't do our best to take care of our children. And so I just made it my purpose and my job to advocate as much as I can and as hard as I can, because I don't want what happened to me to happen to anyone else. It's just not okay. We have to do better. And I feel not responsible, like woe is me, but as an adult, I want to be responsible. And so, you know, I don't want to save the world. You know, it's not that. It's not, you know, who do I think I am that I can save the world? No, but I do want to do a humanity check. Because why did these things happen to us? And why are these statistics continuing to grow? That's not okay, and we have to do better. And so it's that passion that happened, that, you know, that stirred in me. I got angry, and I wanted to heal, and through my healing process of learning about myself, understanding things about myself, and I did talk therapy. I also did bioenergetic work to help and support me. I also have my faith to help me through what I had, or my journey. But I just learned lessons, and I realized we're all on this planet, and I'm not alone. And none of us get to come to this planet and just not experience something. And so, so it's just, for me, it was just about taking all of that, understanding it, and moving forward, and really doing my best to leave a better legacy for people to come. So.
Thank you. Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, about what your healing journey was like going forward from the time that you escaped your trafficker.
Yeah, so I'm still on that journey. But something that I just want to get out really, really fast is, you know, as a survivor, you know, I have had a broken heart, but I'm not a broken person. And I think we need to remember that and keep that when we're interacting with other survivors and other people, realizing that they might have had their heart broken, but they're not a broken person. There's always hope for them. And I think, you know, recently I've been digging deep into learning about myself, but something that has helped me in my healing journey has definitely been my son. He has been my biggest teacher. Seeing him do things that are amazing, it's like, okay, all right, he's getting it. We're doing good. But also seeing those subtle habits that, reality check, where is he learning that from? Oh, it's me. And realizing, wow, you know, if I want to really make an impact, I need to learn things that I didn't learn when I was his age. I grew up in foster care. I was in foster care from the time I was 4 till the time I was 13. So bouncing around from home to home, low income, you know, areas, very poorly treated. I felt like I was a second-class citizen being in the foster care system. So the system failed me. And I had to see that and acknowledge that and relearn some of those skills that I didn't know. I was oblivious to them. And my dear parents had adopted me at 13 years old. They had me for 6 years until I moved out. That's nothing. And, you know, oftentimes they say, Susie, I wish we would have known. I wish we could have helped more. How did we not prepare you for that? And I'm now in a place where I say, you know, Mom, you adopted 6 kids, you had 7. You didn't know. You didn't know. But now you can know. And so I think in my healing journey, it has been learning about myself and realizing, okay, where were the skills that I did not know? Where did that fall short? And where can I come in and teach people, teach the foster care system, teach parents, okay, we need to be teaching our youth and our kids, you know, these vital core skills, you know, self-love, acceptance, learning how to stand in their power. You know, my son, he is so funny. He is allowed to tell me if I'm being a brat. He is allowed to tell me, you're not being very nice, Mama. And at first, some of my friends saw that, and it shocked them. And I was like, and they're like, no, you have to be nice to your mom. And I said, no, he's right. I've had a hard day. I'm being kind of mean. I shouldn't, you know, I should get myself together. And I think stepping into that power and letting the youth see us work through those things and explain to them that Mama Bear and Papa Bear are not the know-it-all. and we don't know, and sometimes we do have those hard days, and expressing those hard days are so important. And that has been really, really dear to my healing journey, and also having, various resources at hand, therapeutic resources from different organizations, and tools have been very vital into my healing journey. And again, learning choices. Like, I have so many choices, which is so empowering. And one thing might not work for me, but it might work for the next person, and that is okay. And stepping into that, and being able to share those tools and resources with other survivors all over the world is something that I'm very passionate about.
I would love to affirm your trauma conscious, trauma. I would call it almost trauma informed parenting. You're doing such a good job just making those decisions, and I definitely resonate with what you said about, I feel like my children have been one of my biggest teachers. I feel like in a lot of ways we're given the children that we needed to grow us. And so that's been a big part of my healing journey as well, because hurt people, and I know we have had conversations about wanting to break that generational trauma and not wanting to continue to have children who are not in tune with their emotions and who don't know how to set boundaries. And I have 2 little boys, and I'm very conscious of how I talk to them and how I raise them. And yes, sometimes it does sound like my children are being rude to me, but I want them to know that if something happens that doesn't feel good to their body, or that they don't agree with, or that they don't believe is right, I want them to practice being able to stand up for themselves now. So because as soon as they get that skill, it just becomes second nature to them. And as long as they do it and, to their mom in a respectful way, obviously, then that's something that I allow. But I also am very conscious about raising boys, and I don't want boys that are emotionally damaged and then go on to be offenders. So it's been a lot of growth for me personally to accept. It took me about 15 years, because I told myself for about 15 years that I was not affected by my trauma, just because my coping mechanism was to compartmentalize and just to be very desensitized, no emotional connection to my trauma. And so it took me seeing my children and seeing that I was not having an emotional connection with my children to realize that maybe I was affected by my trauma, and maybe I do need to begin healing and looking at it a little differently. So I think it's such an important point that there are so many different ways to healing. There's so many paths, and any one way is not correct for every single person.
I do want to open it up to questions in a minute, but I think there's an important question to ask the 3 of you while we have so many important ears in the room listening wherever you're listening from. Tanya, I saw an interview you did a while ago, and one thing that you said was the transition back was the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. And you talked about some of the resources that helped you. But I think the important question for people here to know and to go home and think about and to feel like how they're going to act is, where are the gaps in the resources? How can we better provide resources to a wider demographic?
I love this question. This is where I am right now. Just really, as we're hearing more about survivors and folks that are saying, hey, I want to help survivors. One thing that I know I feel like it's true with a lot of survivors I spoke with. One thing we don't want are handouts, right? We hate that. Oh my God. Because we always feel like there's this negotiating factor. Right, there's this give and take, and I have nothing else to give. Right? I don't want to give you anything, but I do. But I don't want to owe you anything, basically, right? So, so this is what I read. Booker T. Washington's autobiography. If you have never read it, I suggest it. It's just amazing how how we're we haven't changed much in our society. But he made me think of this So he was straight out of emancipation, and he was seeing some things, just looking at people coming right out of slavery. And when he was talking about it, my thought was, oh yeah, how do you empower people who've been bought and sold? Like, how do you do that? Well, if you've never been bought and sold, you don't know how to, right? Because this is something that messes with and deals with this part of you. For us, is about our worth and our value connected to our sexuality and connected to our performance in a way that you, people who are not survivors of this, you just haven't had, that experience. So sometimes there's some relatability, right? And that's why you want to do good, because you know this is wrong and you want to fix it. And you can imagine what a survivor of human trafficking or a person who's been bought and sold probably had gone through, right? But take a step back a moment and understand that this person's been bought and sold. Now, I need this program, this nonprofit or this agency, this business I'm doing, to be able to empower this person who have had this experience. Now, how do we do this? Well, you go to people who've been bought and sold, right? And now, in Booker T. Washington's experience, he started the Tuskegee Institute, and if they wanted to go to school, they had to actually come and build the school. They had to put their hands to it. They didn't bring in a contractor, they did it themselves, put their hands to it. And so, that's one way. I don't know how to do it today, but I know that in my own life, I had to put my hands to it. And I had to make sure that I'm understood, and I found a place at the table where I didn't have to perform, where I didn't have to have any of those other attachments. And when I found people that were able to do it, few and far in between, I brought those people around me to support me. I'm thankful that I was smart in that. I need to know that skill because I didn't learn it when I was coming up. I didn't have that, right? I didn't have someone to teach me how to have healthy communication, like how to negotiate in a healthy way where it benefits both of us, right? So just kind of all of those skills that I didn't have and I had to learn. And so, yeah, it was really hard. And I was a single mom and I just kept having babies and, it was difficult, to take care of them and take care of myself, but I finally did it. Had there been organizations that were there to help me figure that out earlier, to help me put my hands to it and build it myself and teach me some of those really foundational skills, not to make jewelry or clothes, and there's nothing wrong with it, but sometimes I didn't want to do that. But, helping folks learn more about who they are to the core, right? There's nothing like that, knowing who you are in the core. For me, it was about asking the question, all of us have to do it because in all of us, we are all humans, so you can relate to that. And all of us are asking the questions, where did we come from, right? Who are we, and where are we going? Well, I'm asking that question too, right? So it's just some of the common places where we can all, come together in order to help each other grow.
I heard you say that someone who has not been bought and sold cannot assume that they know what someone who has been bought and sold thinks or feels. And I think that that's so relatable to survivors in general, right? So I think that that is such an important point that it keeps coming up, I feel like, in these conversations that we're having, where ask the survivors what they need, right? Like have survivors who are informing what are these gaps, what are the things that we need. Don't assume that you know. I think that's one of the common threads that a lot of us feel, and that really is kind of offensive when someone says, well, you have to do this, or this will help you. And it's not true. So asking survivors, asking people who have been bought and sold, asking people who have been assaulted, who have been abused, what is it that would have helped you? So, I'm so glad we're having this conversation and asking these questions, because if you have not been there, I would never assume that I would know how you felt. So I think that's kind of the core of where are these gaps.
And that's a strength in survivors that I see in working with other survivors. Even though we've been through something very similar, I have valued my own uniqueness, right, and my own experience. And so because I value that and I understand it, I also value the experiences other survivors have. I don't even assume that we all know or we are coming from the same place. In some places, the complexity of it, having that understanding, yes, but I still see each survivor as having their own experience, and so the way that they would be empowered for something would be different for me, because we're all very different, right?
I think for me, too, keeping in mind, and I love seeing that there are so many good people that do want to make an effort and an impact against, this horrible crime. But again, just reiterating what they have said is listen to your survivors. We might not have the skills to communicate why something is making us feel really gross, and it's making us feel like not safe, is what I'm trying to get at. And listen to them. Really take that into heart, that they might not have the skills that you have to communicate that, but empower them by asking questions or allowing them to express themselves in a safe place with you, and not judging them. And taking that as, okay, something is here. What are they communicating? Do we need to change something? Do we need to have a conversation about something? What is going on here? Because I am 26 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'm stepping into actually learning about myself. I had something mentally going on with my brain. I have ADHD. I did not know that until about 6 months ago. And I'm now being treated for it. And it's like, I don't know if you guys have seen this in your lives, but it's like I'm relearning myself. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, I like that. I don't like that. I feel this way. I feel that way. And it's like amazing and stressful and so crazy every day. It's like, oh, Susie, you like that. Every single day I'm learning something new about myself. And so when you're working with survivors, keep that in mind. They're relearning themselves. And also keep in mind that they're looking to you. We really admire you. Yes. And we're so grateful for you. Even though we don't vocalize it, we are. And there's a strength in working with people who haven't been through what we have been through, and having them see us as people. So keep that in mind.
They're just like remembering that, well, there's a couple things like our traffickers are masterminds, right? That's what traffickers are. They're always thinking ahead. And, I feel like that was my university, like that was my schooling, to learn some things about society that, just isn't necessarily taught in school. And so just also understanding that when you're working with survivors that, there's this hyper everything, you're hyper thinking, you're overthinking, and some of it is just not from the trauma, it's just, just who people are as people too. But the thing that kind of bothered me the most as I started to come out as a survivor leader is that organizations would come up with something and then would hand it to me and ask for the blessing, right? And it was nice and I appreciated it, but I felt like, well, if you would have brought survivors in at the beginning, then, it would just kind of work a little better, right? We're not, so that would be like big. Like if you're a thinker and you want to create something new, innovative, bring survivors in the beginning of that and bring their complex minds, because they were working with traffickers, right? We know traffickers. Right, we know them better than you do, right? And so bring us in on programs and initiatives and things that you're trying to do in the beginning, and help us and let us help you walk through the process, and let us help you with implementation. You know, one of the things that, you know, for survivors, sometimes we do feel the tension when you have gone to school and you've done that type of work to get where you are today, and then for us, we kind of just come in as experts, and the last thing we want to feel are any challenges where it feels like we're trying to take your job, because we're not. We just don't want one other person to go through what we've gone through, right? And so don't be afraid to partner with us. And if you see, you know, sometimes we may not know what triggers us ourselves, or we're in a situation where we're being triggered and you see it. You know, where if you're going to work with survivors, you should make sure that you're getting, you know, therapy for yourself, that you understand what trauma-informed care is, so that when you notice triggers, we have a relationship where you can say, or do, or respond in a healthy way. One thing that excites me is when I see community work together for survivors. Why? Because many of us had situations where we didn't see people work together for us. So when you come out of yourselves and work together for us, it teaches us, right? It teaches us something about, you know, humanity and community, and it helps us to trust again.
Listen, I know we're at our time limit, people in the back, so I will be cool. But I think I'd be remiss if we just spent so much time saying ask survivors to not allow for a couple of questions. While we have everyone here, while we have you guys here, obviously you can connect with these three amazing women after, but are there any questions? Yes?
Thank you so much.
Oh, we got a mic coming.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. That was so powerful and amazing. You guys are amazing human beings. I am Chief Medical Officer at a free clinic in Carson. It's called People's Health Clinic.
Nice.
How do we connect to people who are being trafficked? How do we make ourselves available to you? How do we reach out to you?
Do you want to?
Go ahead if you have something. If you have an idea.
Do you?
I think we're all different, and I'm a little bit more public about my story now. I have survivor friends who are not, and so I respect their comfort levels. I just think direct communication, and some survivors are online, some aren't, but knowing where, what organizations that they're with and going through that and seeing if it's appropriate is super helpful and shows a lot of respect.
Yeah, I was actually going to say something like that. Being in a clinic, right, emergency room is really hard to connect, right, because this is just the atmosphere, this is what you're doing. You're trying to get to the next person who's in the waiting room. So it's really important that you as a medical professional, you know, in that situation to connect with the resources around you, because if you know them really well, you don't feel the pressure of having to identify and then to report. But you have your community that you're connected with, you can always call them and say, hey, I think I have a situation here, right? Can you come in? And that way you can continue to do your job.
Also, with regard to people who are actually being trafficked, how do we make ourselves available to those folks?
I didn't hear her.
Yeah.
How do you make yourself available to people who are currently in this situation who they have not gotten out yet?
Like you see it and you want to know
just-
what to do.
Or just we want to be
Available so that they can know who to reach out to. Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Susie.
I mean, every nonprofit that I've worked with, they always want different skills. And so learning where you want to work and doing a little bit of research of the organizations that are in your area and just extending a hand and saying, hey, these are the skills that I know. If you ever need to utilize me, I am happy to do so. I think would be very appropriate.
And I think one of the things as I was flying here, I was obviously hyper vigilant about human trafficking, and something that seems like such a small, insignificant step, but really can be so impactful for so many people, are those signs that you see at the airports on the back of doors. Are you being trafficked? Here's a number to call. So having those kind of covert resources, I would imagine, would be a way to reach people who maybe would not be able or willing to, come out and come to they're being too controlled to get to a medical facility. So I think the kind of more covert ways that we can get those resources out into the public where someone can come across them, then maybe that would give someone a little bit of a better ability to escape that kind of situation. I don't want to speak for you guys, but that was that. Okay.
Well, thank you all so much. Again, these are your survivor leaders. I encourage you to connect with them. This is what they're here for. They want to be part of the conversation that all of you are having about them and about other survivors. So thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your stories. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you to our panelists, Kara, Susie, Tanya, and a special thank you to Ashley for moderating that. I love that Tanya brought up the importance of having the perspective of the survivors involved in the curriculum and the programs that we develop. At the Malouf Foundation, we seek to amplify the voices of survivors throughout our initiatives. And the On Watch training, for example, is a fantastic resource that was created in collaboration with survivor leaders. On Watch is a program to help you spot, to help you report, and to help you prevent sex trafficking that happens here in the United States, and to give you insights into the lived experiences of survivors. Many have already taken the On Watch training. Is there anybody here that has taken the On Watch training? Raise your hand if you've taken the On Watch training already. Wonderful. There's many that have not, and we encourage you to do so. It's completely free, and it only takes about 1 hour to complete. So we encourage you to go take the On Watch training. And how many of you have taken the On Watch training to your businesses? To your business? I know Barry has, several others have. Now, that's another great opportunity to bring this to your businesses and encourage your employees or your groups or your members to participate and become On Watch certified. Now, if you get 90% of your or more of your organization to take the On Watch training, you can become a certified On Watch advocate, and we encourage you to do that. And you can learn more about the On Watch training from Luke Madsen, who's the program director upstairs at the On Watch booth, and we encourage you to go learn more information from him. Okay, now it is time for food. How many of you are hungry? Many of you, okay. We have food, we have lunch available to you upstairs. Now, there are 2 food stations. They are identical to one another, so don't think that you're missing out if you get in one line and not the other. Just go to the line that is shortest and that you can get your food the quickest. There will be some volunteers upstairs over here in this area that will help guide and direct you. We will begin our next session at 1:30, so please be back in your seats by 1:30 so we can begin the next session. Thank you so much.
Praise for the morning, praise for